Did you know that the simple design of a wall could decide the fate of an entire empire? Between the precisely engineered Roman fortifications and the wild strategic tactics of barbarian tribes, the battlefield was much more than just men in combat. It was also a clash of minds, cultures, and stone. When we think of fortresses, we imagine protection. But what if I told you that Roman fortifications weren't just defensive, they were weapons of conquest, while those of the barbarians were a cry of resistance? The difference wasn't just tactical. It was a statement of who was ready to shape the world and who was fighting just to survive in it. Imagine living in a time where your knights were protected by walls designed to last centuries. Or, on the other side, being surrounded by an improvised fortress, knowing that at any moment the Roman legions could break through. What made the Roman forts so formidable? And why, despite this, some barbarian fortifications still managed to hold up? The secret lies in the details, and the stories behind these structures reveal much more than just architecture. They reveal the spirit of two worlds colliding. Throughout this video, you'll discover how Roman order and efficiency translated into nearly indestructible structures, and how the barbarians used chaos and terrain to their advantage in their resistance. We'll look at moments when these two worldviews collided and how seemingly insignificant details changed the fate of entire battles. We'll explore the tactical differences between Roman and barbarian forts. You'll understand why the Romans didn't just build to defend, but to impose their presence, and how the barbarians turned the land into allies. We'll revisit epic clashes that started with a wall and ended with stories for the ages. If you love stories from the Roman Empire and want to uncover the secrets and strategies that shaped the world, subscribe to the channel now. Here, you'll find daily videos filled with fascinating facts and valuable lessons from history. And of course, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps more history enthusiasts discover this content and encourages us to keep bringing you amazing videos every day. Ready to dive in and explore the grandeur and chaos together? The grandeur of Roman forts wasn't just an architectural whim. They were a carefully calculated tool to solidify Rome's dominance over vast and hostile territories. From the very beginning, Roman military engineering stood out for its precision. Every fortification, from small temporary camps to permanent fortresses, followed standardized layouts. The symmetry, perfect angles, and durable materials like stone and concrete reflected the Roman spirit of absolute control. These forts weren't just physical structures, but symbols of Roman presence and power, designed to intimidate enemies and inspire respect among allies. Inside these structures, every detail was meticulously planned to maximize functionality. The tall, thick walls not only protected against direct attacks, but also created a sense of invulnerability. Strategically positioned watchtowers ensured constant surveillance, while ditches and stakes around the walls discouraged attempts at approach. The internal organization was flawless. Soldiers' tents, supply depots, and even baths were placed in specific locations, streamlining logistics and daily routines. This reinforced military discipline, one of the pillars of the Roman war machine. The secret to the efficiency of these structures lay with the Roman engineers, who combined practical skill with theoretical knowledge. Many of them were trained legionaries, meaning they could work under harsh conditions and still meet the required standards. Behind every fortification were stories of soldiers who, in addition to fighting, became builders and architects. These engineers also constantly innovated, adapting techniques to respond to terrain challenges or specific threats from local enemies. These forts weren't just for defense. They also helped consolidate Roman expansion. Whenever a new region was conquered, the forts marked Roman presence, ensuring control over strategic routes and suppressing uprisings. They also functioned as administrative centers where taxes were collected and important decisions were made. This showed that for the Romans, military architecture was also a political tool. More than just protection, the forts were the embodiment of the order and stability Rome sought to impose on the world. However, while the Romans shaped the world with their precision and control, the barbarian tribes on the other side of the border took a completely different approach. Their fortifications, deeply connected to the natural environment, often appeared more as extensions of the landscape than artificial structures. This organic relationship with the terrain reveals a crucial aspect of their resistance, and it's what we'll explore next. If Roman forts were manifestations of control, barbarian fortifications represented resistance and freedom. Spread across dense forests, strategic hills, and hidden valleys, these structures often confused invaders with their integration into the environment. Made from wood, compacted earth, and local stones, they reflected the practical ingenuity of the tribes, who made efficient use of the resources available to them. The apparent irregularity concealed a deep knowledge of the land, turning these fortifications into real traps for those daring enough to invade. Unlike the Romans, who sought symmetry, the barbarians built fortresses with strategic unpredictability. Hidden passages, hard-to-find entrances, and natural barriers were part of their defensive tactics. These constructions were designed to favor ambushes and quick attacks, taking advantage of the superior knowledge the barbarians had of the terrain. Tribal chiefs personally led the construction of these fortifications, which often became symbols of resistance and leadership for their communities. Beyond defense, these structures also served as centers of community life. Inside, entire families found shelter during times of conflict, turning the fortifications into small fortified villages. The barbarian culture was reflected in every detail, from the choice of location to the simple decorations that adorned the interiors. Unlike the Roman vision of absolute dominance, these structures represented the unity of a people with their land, their freedom, and their tribal identity. Despite their less imposing appearance, the barbarian forts challenged the Roman forces in unexpected ways. While the Romans relied on discipline and organization, the barbarians exploited unpredictability and adaptability. This led to memorable clashes, where order faced ingenious chaos. In many cases, the Romans, with all their technical superiority, were forced to acknowledge the resilience of these structures and the creativity of their defenders. These encounters, which marked the meeting of two such distinct cultures, became even more intense when their fortifications turned into the battlefield. Roman walls and barbarian strongholds stopped being just defensive structures and became the main players in historic clashes, where the fate of entire territories was decided. It is in this setting that strategies collide and are tested, as we'll explore in the next chapter. Fortifications, which initially rose as cultural and military barriers, often became the epicenters of historic confrontations. The clash between Roman discipline and barbarian unpredictability not only tested each side's tactical abilities, but also revealed the weaknesses and strengths of their structures. A prime example of this was the Siege of Alesia, where Julius Caesar used not only the strength of his troops, but the ingenuity of temporary fortifications to overcome the Gauls led by Vercingetorix. The strategic use of double walls, one facing inward and the other outward, ensured the Romans maintained control both over the enemy and any external reinforcements. These battles were often decided by small architectural or tactical details. The height of the walls, the depth of the moats, and even the slope of the terrain could turn a fortification into an impregnable stronghold or a vulnerable point. For the barbarians, who rarely had numbers to match the Romans, these details made all the difference. Ambushes near fortifications or the creative use of elevated terrain showed how crucial environmental knowledge was in determining the outcome. Even in the face of Roman technical superiority, the barbarians found ways to surprise and sometimes win. The narrative of these battles also reveals the evolution of Roman strategies over time. In prolonged campaigns, such as those against the Germans or the Britons, the Romans learned to adapt their tactics to the circumstances. Rather than relying solely on permanent forts, they began to construct highly defensive mobile camps, known as castra. These camps combined Roman precision with the need for mobility, allowing their legions to maintain the initiative in hostile terrain. Thus, fortifications became an extension of military strategy, shaping the battlefield to suit Rome's objectives. On the other hand, the barbarians, observing Roman strategies, also began adapting their own fortifications. More organized tribes, like the Visigoths and Ostrogoths, began incorporating Roman elements into their structures, blending traditional improvisation with external influences. This created unique scenarios where barbarian fortifications became hybrids of wild resistance and meticulous engineering. These transformations also reveal how cultures influenced each other, even in times of war. The battlefield was not just a place of destruction, but also a space for mutual learning. As the ruins of these fortifications witnessed the clashes between two worlds, they also held the secrets of their cultures and histories. It is among these ruins that we discover more than just war strategies. We find traces of civilizations and the fundamental differences that shaped their destinies, something that the next chapter will explore in depth. The ruins of Roman forts, still standing in many parts of Europe, tell stories of domination, organization, and an almost immortal vision of power. Built to withstand time, many of these structures still impress with their durability. Walls that have survived centuries of wars and harsh weather show the Roman commitment to solid construction, using materials like concrete and stone, and advanced techniques such as opus cementitium, the precursor to modern concrete. These details not only demonstrate Rome's technical superiority, but also reveal a culture that viewed permanence as a reflection of its hegemony. On the other hand, barbarian fortifications left behind more modest traces, often reduced to depressions in the ground or remnants of fossilized wood. However, this does not diminish their historical importance. These ruins reveal a deeply symbiotic relationship between the barbarian tribes and their environment. The choice of perishable materials like wood wasn't just about availability. It also reflected a different worldview. While the Romans sought to create eternal structures, the barbarians saw their fortifications as something alive that adapted and changed over time. The disparity between what remains of each culture raises intriguing questions. Why, while the Romans sought immortality in their constructions, did the barbarians seem more focused on the present? This contrast reveals more than just building techniques. It shows deeply distinct philosophies of life. For the Romans, the permanence of their structures was a way to reaffirm control over conquered peoples. For the barbarians, the connection to the land and the ability to rebuild their fortifications as needed were more valuable than durability. Interestingly, what often disappears physically remains alive in legends. Many barbarian forts, whose traces are almost non-existent, are still remembered in oral stories and local folklore. This oral tradition challenges the Roman material dominance, showing that a people's memory doesn't depend solely on their buildings. In a way, while the Romans sought eternity in stone, the barbarians found it in their stories. Looking at the ruins that still survive or the myths that persist, we realize that each stone or fragment of wood carries a legacy greater than its original purpose. They make us reflect on the values of each culture, on what they considered essential, and how their worldviews shaped not only their structures but also their destinies. In this way, we continue to connect the marks left by these peoples over time, delving deeper into what their stories still have to reveal. After exploring the impressive Roman fortifications and the symbolic structures of the barbarians, you're probably wondering, what more can we learn about the heroes and strategies that shaped the Roman Empire? If you were fascinated by the tactics and resilience of the Romans, don't miss the epic story of Spurius Ligustinus, the soldier who defied destiny and earned glory. Click here to discover how he overcame massive battles and became a military legend. Spurius' journey is the true essence of Roman courage and strategy.